Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this SciWem webinar. My name is Alice Gent. I'm the chair of the SciWem Scottish branch, and I'm delighted to welcome you today to a webinar on Biodiversity Net Gain. A few housekeeping rules before we start. These webinars are going to be recorded, and also any previous webinars can be available from our YouTube site, which has been put into the chat function by Barbara. Thank you. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat function. Otherwise, please can you add any comments to the question and answer sections if you'd like them to be read out. And if you've got any particular details about the question that you would like to contact people afterwards, please provide your email. A couple of notes about the upcoming events. On the 16th of August, we have the Riverine Invasive Species Talk. That's going to be given by Simon. And then on the 10th of August, we're going to have a webinar on flooding and stormwater management in Malaysia. So I'd be delighted to welcome you to both of those if you're able to attend. For this evening, I'm really pleased to welcome Dr. Francis Williams, who's an Environmental Net Gain Manager for Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks in the north of Scotland. He's had 17 years experience in the utilities and infrastructure departments, and in his current role, he's looking at delivering biodiversity with no net loss on developments, and also has an interest in working with Natural Capital and developing a strategic approach to woodland compensation planting. So without further ado, to pass over to you, Francis. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. The computer's being a bit slow at the moment. Hopefully you can see that slide there. Yeah, so I'm Francis Williams. I'm the Environmental Net Gain Manager for SSEN Transmission. People who don't know, SSEN Transmission own and operate the high voltage transmission network in the north of Scotland, so basically from near Stirling northwards up to including the islands. I think we have about 5,000 kilometres of overhead line and about 180 odd substation sites. So there's quite a diverse number of habitats that we impact on. So what I'm going to talk about today is biodiversity net gain, what it is, SSN transmission and biodiversity net gain, and while we're doing it, how do we fit it in within the development process? How do we monitor and report it? How does it impact on the operations, and where we see biodiversity net gain going? How does it fit in with things like kind of net zero and nature positive? So first off, biodiversity is defined as a development that leaves biodiversity in a better state than before. In the UK, it's predominantly measured using the Natural England metric. It's now up to biodiversity metric 3.0. We started looking at biodiversity net gain back in 2017 when it was still the DEFRA metric. So we've developed our own metric alongside really the kind of Natural England one, and it does differ in a number of kind of places, just to try and fit in with the kind of habitats and the challenges that we have in Scotland. But regardless of whatever metric you use, there are basically 10 good practice principles that should always apply to any biodiversity net gain approach. Principle one is obviously always apply the mitigation hierarchy. So if you can avoid impacts, you always should. And you just mitigate those, and compensation is always the last resort. Avoid losing biodiversity that you can't offset. Things like that could be good quality peatlands, could be good quality ancient woodland. You've got to make sure that your biodiversity net gain doesn't impact on people in a kind of negative way. You've got to make sure that you understand the risks of the biodiversity net gain that you're putting in. And I think principle 5 is one of the key ones for me. It is measurable. So it's a measurable net gain contribution that's backed up by a metric that shows how you've come to that measure. You've got to try and achieve the best outcomes you can. It's got to be over and above what you would normally have to do anyway. You have to create a legacy, so it's got to be a meaningful kind of longer term benefit. you've got to be as sustainable as you can, and also principle 10 is very important as well. You've got to be transparent in how you've calculated your biodiversity impacts and how you've calculated how you're going to compensate for those losses if there are any. So how do you go about actually measuring biodiversity on a site? Well, first of all, you measure your baseline biodiversity. That's a phase 1, or predominantly now we're heading towards using UK HAB. You do a phase 1 or a UK HAB survey. Then on top of that, you look at the distinctiveness of that particular habitat. Then you look at the condition of it. Then you look at where it is, and then you look at where it is actually how connected is it to other valued habitats in that area. Then you get your biodiversity unit. So that's your baseline. Once you've done your baseline, you calculate what losses you are going to get from that, and then how are you going to provide enhanced or new habitats for that. When you're looking at an enhanced habitat or a new habitat, there are risk factors that come into that, because some habitats are more difficult to create. Some habitats take a long time to create as well, like woodland. And also you want to look at how far away are your creation or enhancement sites from where the impact is. And that gives you your biodiversity units after the development. Then you take away your pre-units from your post, and that gives you your net change. Everything is in biodiversity units, but what I would stress is that these units are only a proxy value of proxy relative value. So it's not saying that really is what the biodiversity value is. It's just putting a proxy value on it, because you could never truly value biodiversity. Any questions on that side, or should I move on?
There's nothing yet, Francis.
Cool.
So
yeah, so as I was saying right at the start, we started looking at biodiversity net gain back in 2017 and trialed it on 5 different substation sites. Based on our experiences with that, we formally set out our approach in 2019 and had extensive consultation, both in England as well as in Scotland as well. And out of that, we published our consultation document, which is a network for net zero, which is kind of that kind of document there. And in that, we committed to no net loss in non-irreplaceable habitats from April 2020 and net gain in all projects from 2025. So we've already started on this journey. As part of the development of this toolkit, as I was saying, we started off with the DEFRA toolkit. We do have a SSEN specific toolkit, which we feel is better suited to the habitats and conditions prevalent in Scotland. The main differences really are how we deal with impact on peatland, and some of the time to target condition, but generally it's actually very similar to the Natural England metrics. Well, why did we think we needed to change the approach to considering a more kind of biodiversity net gain method? Well, we like the idea that it's a much more quantifiable measure of the impacts, remembering that it is a proxy. It allows us to identify the most valuable habitat much more easily. And then that means that you can bring it in earlier in the development process. You can really highlight to people who aren't necessarily technical experts about the areas that really do need to be avoided, and the areas perhaps where development is better suited to. And it does, because we were the first, amongst the first adopting it in Scotland, that has allowed us to actually be ahead of the game and to really look at how biodiversity can be assessed in a practical way. So on our projects, how does it work? What are the issues? Also, fairly recently, it is now a regulatory reporting requirement. So every year we have to start demonstrating to the regulator the number of biodiversity units that we've impacted on and the number of biodiversity units we have actually enhanced or created. And the other side of it as well is we have an existing asset base. If you follow a biodiversity net gain approach, that allows you to actually look at those habitats you have and identify ways of actually enhancing the value of those sites for biodiversity, but it also could be for other reasons as well. And I think something that I haven't mentioned here, it also helps with stakeholder engagement as well, helps to engage with the communities that we have our impacts on. So within the development process, biodiversity net gain is built in right at the very start, and I think is absolutely crucial that it is. And you can see on the right-hand side of the slide in particular, where we've got the development stages, and you get increasing kind of definition of what your project will look like. And on the right-hand side of that triangle, that demonstrates the increasing level of detail that you actually need to actually to have as part of your biodiversity net gain assessment. So one thing that has been very successful and something that we've won several awards for is this second step at the optioneering stage, where we look at the biodiversity net gain site optioneering toolkit. And what that basically is, that is a very simple toolkit that's based on existing habitat data and is used to compare either route options with each other or site options, and it purely looks at the baseline data. And then you can almost RAG score, so red, amber, green, score the habitats based on their relative value. You can get an idea right at the start of which sites are going to require the most work to kind of mitigate or compensate for those potential losses. But that it is very much a kind of a desktop kind of exercise, because at that kind of stage you don't really have that kind of detail. Then when you get much more much more detail and much more certainty from the engineers about what your infrastructure is going to look like, then you begin to develop your full biodiversity net gain assessment alongside the other things you need to do for your kind of EIA and EA, and then you begin to look at your landscape plans and see what they actually say, and if you have to change the landscape plans to achieve the no net loss or the net gains for those sites. But your BNG assessment that you submit is no way near the end of it. You've then got to look at that biodiversity net gain assessment or through construction. Has anything happened in construction that is impacted on the landscaping that you can put in? Then you've got to go back and then reassess your biodiversity net gain assessment to say that it's still valid. And then once your habitats are there, it's no good then just walking away after 5 years, because some of your habitats will take up to 25 years to create, so 25 to 30 years to create for woodland anyway. And then you have to make sure that it's considered within the operations and maintenance side of things as well. So the monitoring, so it's making sure that your operation staff understand what they need to do to the individual habitat parcels, to make sure that you actually deliver on the gains that you've actually promised. So there's all sorts of things that, all sorts of steps you have to go through to make sure that what you've promised right at the start is what you actually kind of deliver on. This is an example here of the output that you get when you're actually calculating your baseline biodiversity unit. So our toolkit, like the Natural England toolkit, is an Excel spreadsheet with lots of drop downs. You have lots of drop downs, so you just have consistency of data input. Some of these fields are pre-populated, so you can see there the calculation units. That's basically, is it an area, is it a linear feature, and if it's a linear feature, is it a hedgerow or is it a watercourse? Because what I should have mentioned earlier is the area habitats are kept distinct from linear features, be those hedgerows or water courses. So you choose what kind of habitat survey you've done. In this case, it's a phase 1. You input the area of that habitat. Your distinctiveness is automatically populated. Your condition assessment then feeds into your condition rating there, which is another drop down. Your connectivity, where we have set connectivity values for that. You look at your strategic significance, and then out of that, this suggested action box is used to flag up that the habitats that you really should avoid, or ones that are so low in value, low in relative value, that you can, it's quite easy to replace the biodiversity that you've actually lost. And then in the other box there, that's the kind of output that you would get from carrying out an assessment on a site. So you've got there at the bottom the total area of habitat you're impacting on, and the biodiversity units that are currently there on that site. So that's the kind of output we get. And then at the very start, the optioneering or route selection, you can't really assess how you're going to mitigate for those impacts, because you don't know what they are. So from that kind of output on that last slide, you get this kind of plan, which I personally think are very useful. On this one, the consultant has used kind of purple down to kind of almost a turquoisey blue, kind of the purple being the highest distinctiveness habitat. So they're the ones you really want to avoid. In this case, it's probably looking at this, it's the ancient woodland. The blue stuff tends to be kind of low biodiversity value coniferous woodland. And as I was saying before, it's based on kind of desktop, but you can bring in kind of local knowledge, but a lot of the habitat condition is based on kind of assumptions, and as long as you set out those assumptions, then that's absolutely great. And I think one of the big things that you can get out from doing an exercise like this is to really highlight the risks of your project achieving no net loss or net gain. So on the right hand side, you can see the histogram there, that most of these routes here are roughly similar. We also sometimes break it down into how many biodiversity units are there per kind of hectare, which can be useful if you've got linear routes of different lengths, so you're not being skewed by different areas in there. So that helps us highlight the areas of risk and show if there's any one option that's got significantly less biodiversity measured in biodiversity units than another. But I would stress that it's not the only criteria that's used in the optioneering or the route selection process. There's a whole load of other factors that have to be built into it. How much felling are you doing? How technically feasible is it to do it, and also cost as well has to feed into that. Once you've done that and you've picked your route, or you've picked your site, and you've got kind of detailed plans, then you go on to the next stage, which is the full biodiversity net gain assessment, kind of using the tool here. And the big difference then is, you kind of you would go back and you'd redo your baseline, and you would do a full proper survey based on actually site surveys there, and then you really begin to look at what you need to do to actually compensate for those losses that you are going to have. And this is an example of the output there. For example, we are going to create 2.56 hectares of broadleaf plantation woodland. We're going to aim for a target condition of good. You can set these target conditions. Obviously, it's easier and quicker to get a poor condition than it is a good condition. It's relatively easy to plant trees, but it takes quite a long time. So and those are the biodiversity units that you've got created, and you would have to work through your landscape plan or your other plans or your habitat management plans to make sure that in the end you get your no net loss or your net gain, and you can see the risk factors in there. And out of that, you know, once you've looked at your landscape plans and you found one that works, then you have to produce this long-term landscape plan, which then goes to the operations staff to, you know, so they can maintain and monitor and report on the habitats as required. So this is an example of a kind of substation site up in the north of Scotland. Here we've got mostly conifers and a bit of bog. The bog's the purple. Baseline biodiversity is 18.04, which probably isn't an awful lot, predominantly because it's coniferous plantation that's got relatively low biodiversity as measured by the metric. The bottom there is what our landscape plan is. The grey area is the area that's actually lost. This was one of the substations that we looked at to see how the biodiversity net gain approach could be used in Scotland, looking at a norm, you know, our standard landscape plans, which used to be only focused on screening these substations. We were going to get a 3% net gain, which is actually relatively good. When we looked at a whole suite of substations, we were generally looking at about a 20% loss. And if we'd just implemented the consented landscaping plans, when we changed it and had a bit of a more of a biodiversity head on and looked at it from a BNG perspective, we managed to change that to a 47% net gain as measured by the metric. And that was really kind of thinking more cleverly about creating mosaics, creating scrub habitat, avoiding kind of impacts on the bog and things like that. So and this was an example where we were retrofitting this, and it did show these kind of gains. As I was mentioning earlier, you've got to take it through. You know, that it's all very well having that plan sorted out, and it looks absolutely great and kind of wonderful. And then you get onto site, and then the contractor comes along, and all sorts of things can actually change. And they kind of on the left hand side is an example of a substation site. That was the plan that we had initially. On your right hand side, that is the new plan. So we've got a whole watercourse and a suds attenuation pond that have just been, have actually come in because that's the kind of thing that we needed to do for flood risk. That means then you have to go back and you have to look at that plan and fit in your biodiversity kind of around that. So your biodiversity plan needs to be adaptive to the ever changing conditions kind of on site. But at least if you do a biodiversity net gain assessment, it allows you to see what those impacts are. And I think it's all very well having biodiversity net gain plans that look great and are filed away somewhere, and everybody thinks it's kind of hunky-dory. But when you take a biodiversity net gain approach, you've really got to be thinking for the long term, taking a properly sustainable view on the habitats you're creating. So you're looking at 25 to 30 years in advance, whereas I think a lot of the time you would go and plant your trees, fulfill your screening requirements, maintain the trees for 5 years, and then walk away from it. Here, if you really want to do biodiversity net gain, you have to be thinking about, those habitats for 30 odd years until those trees have actually really grown and are actually in a sustainable condition. So, alongside all of these biodiversity net gain plans is you've got to have a kind of a monitoring system and a reporting system, so you can report. And for us, it's another important thing that we have to do for our regulator anyway, is to provide what gains we've actually made or what losses we've made on a year-by-year basis. So we've developed an Excel spreadsheet that's based on that will be based on GIS inputs for all our sites, so we can then begin to really kind of interrogate the data. So not only how many of the projects have achieved no net loss, how many achieved net gain, what kind of habitats are we impacting on? What is the biodiversity impacts on those habitats? What kind of habitats are we putting back? What are the biodiversity units per habitat that we're putting back? Are we impacting on woodland? If we are impacting on woodland, how much of it is coniferous? How much of it is broadleaf? So it really begins to allow you to really track this. And then once we you kind of begin to monitor, then those monitoring results will feed back into this, because as your habitats mature, your risk factors drop, so your biodiversity units that you've actually delivered kind of increase, and you've got to keep a handle on that. You've also got to keep a handle on what are those habitats actually doing. Do they need adaptive management? Is it working? You know, so there's a crucial role for ops as well to be able to feed back into this, and also for this tool to be able to be used by the operations teams as well, so they know what they're actually aiming for. These slides are, you know, the next couple of slides are really about what our experience is, you know, using Biodiversity Net Gain since 2017. Was that's nearly four years now. Most of the impacts we've got, probably not surprising, are coniferous woodland, lots of plantation woodland, grassland, and quite a lot of arable land as well. So, and the kind of habitats we look to create or enhance mostly are mixed or broadleaf woodland. Part of that's to do with screening, part of that's to do with the control of woodland removal policy, and we don't tend to plant kind of conifers back. But with any trees, you have that long time to target condition, which can be a struggle sometimes if you've got a very constrained site, that because of the risk factors involved, you may not get the biodiversity units that you would normally kind of expect. So it can be that just replacing the same area of conifers with broadleaves won't give you the biodiversity units to achieve no net loss, and you will, because of the risk factors, have to probably plant a slightly larger area up. So that's why it's very important to really bring biodiversity net gain right early on, because your site boundaries or your land ownership boundaries either have to increase or you have to find compensatory off-site sites, because you will need more habitat to offset the losses that you're getting, or to compensate for those losses. We've also found that scrub is really good from a biodiversity unit perspective. It does provide some screening. It's also very quick to establish. The time to target condition is a lot less than woodland, but then I would also caution that you've got to make sure that your biodiversity that you're designing on your site in your landscape plans has to make sense. You can't just go for the biggest number you actually want. So you know there's always a bit of caution there, that you just don't whack scrub everywhere, because it gives you the greatest biodiversity units. You've got to actually think about, does it make sense from an ecological point of view? But you know, scrub does have really good benefits for birds and things like that as well. Anyway, we've changed our grass seed mixes as well. We now use species-rich grass mixes. We try and make those as specific to the site as we can. We have a mix that we use up in Caithness, for example, for great yellow bumblebees. That will be different from a grass seed mix that we would use in Aberdeenshire, for example. That's but these grass seed mixes relatively easy to take. They can also reduce the kind of maintenance. We've had some examples of grass seeding that you need to mow every few years rather than 3 or 4 times a year. So there's cost savings in there. There's also massive pollinator benefits, which doesn't come into the biodiversity net gain assessment. But once we start considering kind of natural capital, then those kind of benefits will also add on top of the biodiversity, as well. But again, with any landscape plan, you have to balance your biodiversity gains with the screening that is required, and there is sometimes a bit of to and fro between the landscape architects and the kind of ecological consultants to make sure that we deliver no net loss, as well as provide the screening that is required from from the landscape and visual side of things. You need to really consider what is realistic and sustainable, considering the maintenance regime that you actually have. That's a real bugbear of mine. If you've got, if you've got a new site which is next to a Sitka spruce plantation, you will always get regen, and you'll get quite a lot of regen. So if you're promising to have a habitat that's not got Sitka in it, you have to then put in some kind of maintenance in there to remove that Sitka, or it could be the same with gorse, it could be the same with broom. And is it realistic? Has it been costed? The other thing as well is, it's not realistic for a company like SSEN Transmission to create, calcareous grass, and that's going to be of triple SI quality, because that creates an unnecessary burden on our operations staff. So you've always got to remember, when you're doing your biodiversity net gain assessments, that you should what is a realistic condition that you can actually achieve, considering the kind of resource and monetary constraints that there may be. Thinking about also that, how long does it actually take? And that can go both ways. There are ways of really speeding up the process of creating species-rich grassland. I mean, we do quite a lot of work where the soil fertility is reduced, and then you seed, and then you get pretty good results. So your time to target condition could be less, and within our toolkit there is flexibility to adjust the time to target condition when you think you're going to reach the your kind of target on that. So the lessons learned really, you need to consider it right at the start of the project. You can retrofit it if you want. It's difficult. It is harder to do. Some sites are easier to retrofit than others, but I would always say to consider it right at the start. The biodiversity net gain tool we're using at the moment isn't the final thing, but I don't think we'll ever reach a final kind of agreed tool. There'll always be tweaks. We have particular issues with the Natural England metric, where peatlands are concerned, and with how you assess water bodies, and we think there'll need to be ongoing kind of consultation with others to try and find a way that works for Scotland on that. Compensatory planting is always a challenge, because sometimes if you've not got an off-site option, or you don't want to go off-site, you end up planting on habitats that, if you had a purely biodiversity net gain hat on, you would actually use for, you would either enhance the grassland, or you do this, or you do that. You get stuff that gives you more biodiversity units. The landscaping areas will need to be larger, or you need to get off-site compensation. There is no way getting around that. So the earlier you consider the biodiversity net gain, the better. The amount of data that you produce is huge. Particularly for an overhead line, you have loads and loads of polygons, and do not underestimate the ongoing commitment in terms of time, and also staffing for that. If you're going to do it properly, you have to be able to have a system in place that you can monitor every single habitat polygon for the next 25 years. So that is a real key thing with data, not only getting the data, having the data that's consistent, making sure that the right people can access the data, making sure that the data can be updated by the right people. So really have a think about how you're going to manage those huge amounts of data for that amount of time. But on the positive side, we've had really good engagement with all sorts of people. We're working with organizations to really help by their biodiversity targets, but it's also it's been a very positive news story. We've won lots of awards. I think also, apart from internally as well, it's really kind of been good to see the positivity with which this kind of new approach has been kind of embraced. And the last one there really is just making sure that the costs with the maintenance, the reporting, the monitoring is communicated to your operations staff as well, and they have a chance to feed back in, because they are, at the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to deliver on your biodiversity net gain. You can, as I was saying earlier, probably repeating myself, you can produce as many fantastic looking biodiversity net gain reports and assessments as you want, but it means nothing if you don't actually deliver on those commitments that you've made. And you really need your operations staff or contractors to actually do that for you. Otherwise it's just kind of green washing. So the next steps: refinement of the biodiversity net gain tool and the reporting tool. I've had a look at biodiversity metric 3.0, and that's kind of, there's even more kind of alignment between 3.0 and our toolkit, so we're going to have a look at that. Based on experience, we're going to relook at our reporting tool to make sure that it integrates better with GIS, to make sure that we get even more granularity with what our impacts are. We are developing a landscape design manual that considers biodiversity net gain and natural capital as well, so we can really get a handle on what we can deliver on our sites in a sustainable way. And then this all leads, biodiversity net gain leads then into natural capital valuation. So we'll be looking at valuing the natural capital on our non-operational assets, which is another step, but it feeds into it. I mean, most of the tools that we've been looking at, we haven't decided on what kind of tool we want to use there, but most of them are based on habitats. So there is, you can use the same assessments and the same surveys you're doing for biodiversity net gain to feed into a natural capital assessment. And that is me done. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to go through our approach.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Francis. We've got one question at the moment, so if anybody else does have any questions, then please put them in the Q&A box and we can go through them. So the first question is, does the process deal with subsea installations? So obviously, does SSEN have any subsea sort of assets, or are you aware of this process being used for anything subsea wise?
Well, we have a fair few subsea assets, and there are a fair few developments going on there. The toolkit is only for terrestrial habitats at the moment. We're aware that kind of the Natural England toolkit can be used for intertidal habitats. There is a lot going on in the marine BNG side of things, but I don't know, kind of in danger of using a really bad pun. It's a completely different kettle of fish, though. Kind of trying to assess it and everything. So no, at the moment, it is only on terrestrial habitats.
Yeah, just got another question coming in just now. Is it planned to include wildlife, e.g. pollinators, into the monitoring?
Well, that wouldn't be part of biodiversity net gain, because that's purely looking at kind of habitats. But what's been really good in the latest guidance to BM 3.0 is that that there's a section in that about having being able to add on other metrics to your biodiversity net gain assessment. At the moment, we are doing limited site-specific monitoring on bumblebees, particularly up in Thurso, for the great yellow bumblebee. But it's not something that we do kind of across all of our sites.
Questions are coming in thick and fast now. Are there any difficulties in agreeing habitat condition with several stakeholders? I imagine this could be quite subjective.
Well, we use the FEP, which is the Farm Environment Plan, I think, which isn't perfect, I would say, but that's the same condition assessment that is used in the Natural England Biodiversity Metric 2.0. I think some of the condition assessments have changed for BM 3.0, particularly woodland. We haven't had a chance really to consider how that's going to change how we assess the condition, but so far we haven't had any comments back on how we've used the condition assessments. But I think going forward, that particularly with peatland in Scotland, I think there will be need to be more thought put into how you assess peatland condition and how that is measured within a biodiversity metric, be that a Scottish specific one, or be that an SSEN one, or be that kind of Natural England.
No. Would rewilding wilding be included, or does there always need to have an end product in mind?
We've only used it really on the kind of habitats that we are going to actually create. So everything's pretty much focused towards your screening, so that's woodland compensation, so that's the trees. It'd be interesting to see what a more kind of hands-off approach would actually look like from a tool. I mean, we've never used it on a rewilding type of approach. I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't know how the tool would actually work on that. You'd have to try it and see, but we haven't used it in that way yet anyway.
Just one other question that's coming in the moment is, could you please just go over how the biodiversity units come into being? I don't know if that's something that's a bit more technical, or is that something you could answer just now, or could you try?
Well,
if you could quickly go back to the slide.
Yeah.
Go over it.
No, that's absolutely fine. Right. So oh, my computer's so slow that it kind of right. So if we just focus on the easiest one, that's that top line baseline biodiversity measured using a metric. So you kind of go out and do your site survey, and like any phase 1 or UK HAB, you kind of divide up the area into kind of the habitat types. But I suppose the only other thing that you would do, if you had an area of heathland, for example, you would then, if you were just doing a phase 1 or a UK HAB, you would just, you could potentially say that is one polygon. But if you're doing a biodiversity net gain assessment and you had one parcel of that heathland that was poor condition, or the other parcel was good, you would end up with 2 parcels. So you have your area and your and your polygon there. within the metric, there is a distinctiveness score. So that goes from very high to none. So very high is, for example, good quality peatland, certain woodland habitats, to no biodiversity value, which is like kind of a sealed surface like a road or something. So once you've got the size of your habitat, what it is, so heathland, for example, that gives you your distinctiveness score, which is automatically populated. Then your condition score is something that you get from your survey. So that could be poor to good. So that's when you use your condition assessment. So if we're using, I know an example of, I don't know, peatland or something. If there's a lot of drainage, there's a lot of bare peat, then that would be poor condition compared to, your kind of pristine kind of sphagnum bog. Then you look at the strategic kind of location of that. Is it in a plan? Is it not in a plan? And then you look at how that is connected to other habitats within the area, and that gives you your biodiversity unit. So the spreadsheet spits you out what your biodiversity unit is, and that is really just a relative proxy value. Does that explain it, or have I just confused the issue even more?
Well, I was following, but the person answered the question. I was wondering if you got, I think in the chat section, I think links have been shared to the documentation that you guys use. So
Yeah.
if that would go into any sort of things on the document guidance that SSEN have, might go into a bit more detail.
Not on how the biodiversity units derive, because we've got that calculation straight from the DEFRA Natural England kind of system, and that was one reason why we decided to adopt and adapt an existing system rather than developing our own. So we've just kind of piggybacked onto that.
Next question that's come in was, obviously you're mentioning in your presentation that there could be potential extra burden on the operation teams. So has there been any sort of upskilling and cost for time built in, or is it are you trialing partnership for delivery? So has there been any, how have your operations team taken to the process, and it may have been quite new to them, so have they been learning as they go, or has there been any training or anything like that?
Well, before we decided to commit to Biodiversity Net Gain, there was a lot of kind of internal kind of consultation, and with the trial sites that we looked at, it was the kind of habitats that we were creating anyway, with a few tweaks that we're giving these no net losses. So we're not doing anything that's massively new in terms of the kind of habitats that are there. I think what the change is that you then have to begin to look at your soft estate as an asset as well, that you can derive a value from. So I mean, and it's an ongoing process. I think though it's fair to say the operations staff have been very positive about this. They just they need to understand why they're doing it, and what they have to do. So the questions from the operations side have been more on what do they have to do to actually deliver the biodiversity net gain, rather than actually not wanting to do it. So they're all very positive about it, and they understand why we do it, and that's why we're beginning. That's why we're developing this design manual, so and bringing in ops earlier, and making sure that they're brought in earlier to the project process, so that we don't spring anything new. That a project doesn't spring anything new on the operations staff. So it makes it bring them in there earliest, so we can actually cost not only what it takes to create the habitats or enhance the habitats, but how much does it cost to maintain those habitats for the next 25 to 30 years, and what resources do they actually need. I mean, in terms of what they have to do now, we're looking at, I mean, we've just started this process. So, you know, the first round of kind of maintenance will be in probably a few years' time before it starts really kind of kicking in. And by then we'll have more robust processes in place just to make sure that, you know, everybody knows what they're doing and why.
Just another question. Someone else actually potentially going to ask about as well was so it's like how many professions are working on site or working together on one site? So I'm just wondering if you've got the contractor, for example, you're saying if there was you've got your plans in place and then it goes to the contractor gets on site and there needs to be a change for some reason, but that might have an adverse impact or change the score. So is there many people working on site together or looking at the issue together to try and, if the contractor goes, yeah, this is going to cause an issue, it's going to affect the score or may affect the score?
Yeah, well, it kind of is. You've always got to kind of bring everybody in who's potentially impacted on it, because when there's say if you're on site and the contractor decides to do something that has an impact, obviously, on the potential impact on the biodiversity net gain score, which has an impact on our potential kind of reporting, but you know, also there are requirements on our contractors to deliver biodiversity net gain as well. So it has an impact on them, but you've also got to consider, you know, the engineers as well. So you can't design in biodiversity net gain kind of on your, you know, as an ecologist or whatever you are, because you've got to talk to landscape architects, you've got to talk to the engineers, you've got to talk to the operation staff, you know, you've got to talk to your land managers as well. You've got to talk to your project managers. You know, you've got to bring everybody into it, because it does have kind of impacts, you know, like that example that I had up. You put in your flood scheme, that has impacts on you know, your biodiversity. Then if you look at what can you do to that flood scheme to help deliver still for the biodiversity, you may want to change the seeding mix, for example. Then you need to speak to the engineers, you need to speak to the contractors, what's actually possible to change that, to increase, you know the biodiversity of that. Is it feasible, for example, to put in a species rich grassland on that bund? You know, so you're putting in more yellow rattle, for example, so the grass isn't as vigorous. Does that have kind of knock-on effects? How often do you have to then go in and mow that? If you're doing that, does that mean your operation staff have to mow less? You don't want people to go up on a steep bank anyway. So there's all sorts of positives and negatives that can come out of biodiversity net gain, but it shouldn't just be kind of an ecologist sat in a dark room kind of developing the best biodiversity unit score that they possibly can, because you'll never deliver that. So there are a lot of different people who do get involved in development of these landscape plans. I would say the whole project team does.
Yeah, just looking at this other question. So somebody's asked, regarding springs within mature conifer forestry that may have once supported GWGEs and the potential of re-establish them as a net gain, how best is it to deal with the uncertainties of long-term groundwater supply and water chemistry as a result of climate change and the difficulty and timescale parameters of the tool? But I'm sorry, apologies, it's quite wordy, that one.
Yeah,
it's a detailed question. So.
Yeah, and it's absolutely a massive question that probably goes kind of beyond the a simple answer with that toolkit. I mean, any habitat that you want to create, you have to make sure that you can actually create it. Otherwise, there's no point actually suggesting it. And you've got to have a look at, you know, how viable is that particular piece of habitat. If you look at some kind of groundwater dependent terrestrial ecosystem, is it surrounded by kind of other habitat that's going to make it more likely to dry out if you don't kind of maintain it or whatever? Then you have to think about whether it's worth actually trying to claim that you are going to maintain it. So you know, you've got to be very certain that you can actually deliver those habitats before you promise that you're going to do that. And potentially you have to bring in kind of climate change into that. I think most of the habitats that we are aiming to create are relatively easy to maintain, and I think that's probably the way that it will always go, or preferably go. But there are opportunities, say within the wayleave where you've felled a lot of conifers, that there could be wetter spots, you know, within that you could do some work on. But I think the underlying thing is you can only promise what you can actually deliver.
And I think we've got one sort of final question. It's sort of going back to one of the previous questions about upskilling or sort of burdens on operations teams. It was ecologist skills and restoration seems to be a key requirement. Is there a lesson in capturing the right skills and converting habitat to betterment?
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, when you're developing these plans, you have to have, you know, a bit of knowledge and expertise about, you know, how is best to restore kind of habitats. But a lot of that as well is the monitoring as well, because the other thing is that the BNG assessment is always a live kind of document, and you need to be able to monitor those habitats and have a feedback mechanism. If you find that the habitats you're creating, you know, they haven't worked, then perhaps you have to go back to your assessment and think about, actually, that's not working because of X or Y. What can we do? You know, to, you know, either increase the management or actually kind of step back and think, actually, what we initially proposed isn't working. How do we then achieve, you know, our promised biodiversity unit scores, considering that what we tried didn't work? So. No. Kind of adaptive management, I think, is important, because and sharing that kind of knowledge and learning from mistakes as well as successes as well.
Yeah, sounds good. I think that's all the questions we've got. So I could hand it over back to Alice or Barbara.
Thanks very much indeed. That was a wonderful talk, and I think it's, as you said at the very beginning, something that's becoming a lot more mainstream, particularly with the focus on the climate emergency and the upcoming conference in Glasgow. I think it's something that is going to be increasingly popular in years to come. So thank you very much indeed for a delightful talk, and I'll pass over to Barbara for some general comments to finish.
I'd just like to thank the Scottish branch, and also for Francis, for giving a really interesting insight into how the SSEN is actually engaging with the ecological emergency that we do face. And I think it is important that when we're looking at the climate and ecological emergency, we look at them together. And I think this is a very good example, actually, of where we're doing this. So as I said, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. We've had some thanks from some people, some of the participants in this webinar as well. If you want to see any more events, we've got a few coming up, or past events, recordings of past events, then please do go and have a look on the website. And we've got, yes, Richard. So we've got Richard's got his hand up. Would you just like to type your question in the chat so I can see it? Oh, he's disappeared. Anyway, as I said, I'd just like to thank Francis again, and also the Scottish branch, and we look forward to to you at our next event. There's lots of thanks coming through.
Do you want me to just stop sharing now then? I can.
Yes, I'd just like to say thanks, and it's okay to put the webinar up on the website. Yep.
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
I'll get Jane to do that. There's a slight backdrop.
It'd be probably.
But it will be up. As soon as it's up, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Let me know, because I think the comms team might want to put it up on LinkedIn or something like that. That will
absolutely.
Yeah, that would be good. No. Hopefully that was useful for everyone.
Yes, I think that a lot of the feedback, people are saying that they found very interesting and very thorough and well explained. So it went well.
That's good. That's always good. That's always good.
It's an interesting topic and an important one as well. So.
Yeah. No, it is nice that it's. I mean, what's been good is that it's becoming kind of normal practice now, and that, to be honest, has taken a while, but it's always a bit worrying when you kind of try and do something new, and then you're foisting something upon everybody. But then when you see that that people are generally doing biodiversity net gains for all our new developments, and assessments all been done, people are talking about it, it's quite kind of nice. Otherwise you just feel as though you think, what the hell have I created here? And it's just like, but I think the scale of change is so fast, and it's scary. We've done all of this, and then the directors come along and they go, what's next? And you think, we've won all this stuff. Please, can I just have can we just do this? I just want to just hide somewhere and just like sleep for a bit. But then it's like, no, now it's natural capital. Now it's environmental net gain. Now it's social capital. Now it's human capital. It's like it can be overwhelming at times. What we are expected to do, and the escalating kind of expectations, of not only regulators but also investors. They're expecting us to do all these things, and I think a big change will be when this financial disclosure kind of comes in. This nature positive financial disclosure, and I think that's one of the questions was about who's involved in BNG, and I think then that opens it right up to procurement, opens up to to all our finance staff, and there are some in there who are really kind of keen on this. And I think once you've got to report on this in your annual reports, it does change it. I mean, but it does put a lot more focus on environmental professionals as well. I think that's not to be underestimated. That it does put a lot of pressure on people to do these things. So yeah, it can be stressful at times.
I think it's good, as you say, that these things are being done though, because there's so many different tools. As I guess we're thinking more of like natural capital and ecosystem services and things. There's so many different tools that you can be used to calculate sort of benefits, and there's an awful, just in general, environmental things or sustainability benefits, or whether that's air miles or carbon emissions. There's so many tools out there, and I think it's good that these things are actually being used, as you say, getting embedded, which yes does put a lot of pressure on, but equally it helps develop and take forward. Even now it's number 3, version 3 of the Biodiversity Net Gain. We're continually learning from it, and I think it's only when we keep doing things and we work out what does and doesn't work, then you are going to get something that is just, as you say, goes further and further, because it's sort of it kind of combines a lot of good things. There's a lot of good things out there, but I think there's so many of them. I think, you know, if ones that are successful and developed further, then they're going to gain further ground.
Yeah, and it's making sure that those actually work on sites for projects, and you know, that's what I find, you know, even within transmission, the sustainability team are like up over here somewhere, and they've always been, it's not a criticism, but they've always been you know, sustainability people, and it's kind of trying to get that down to the ops guys and the contractors and how a project operates, and it's making sure that, you know, it's all very well kind of making these targets, but how does that actually feed in? How do I kind of do those assessments and make sure that those assessments are still meaningful? And also, you know, so it's people, a lot of people from very different backgrounds talking to each other, trying to deliver, you know, the same thing. And, you know, if you are a developer, particularly with natural capital, it is bewildering at the moment, the number of approaches that you can do, and no one says to you, this is the tool. And I mean, I love being told, actually, and you know, I was brought up in Germany, so I like processes, you know, and which is why I loved BNG, because it's like, here is something that someone has developed. It's a spreadsheet, you plug stuff in and you get an answer out. There's nothing like that for natural capital, and it's like, why, you know? So we're looking at various approaches now, but it's, you know, we're being told by the regulator, you've got to value your natural capital, and it's like, well, how? You know, and it's like, and you get academics who are lovely, but they're going, you know, I was on something about woodland, and then they got on to is it isopropanols or something that get released from trees, you know, and how do you offset that when the weather's bad? And it's like, I can't do that on a project. I can't calculate that, you know, but we need to find something that works for projects similar to Biodiversity Net Gain. It's not perfect, but it provides you with a value. And we need some of that for natural capital, and we're trying quite a lot of stuff at the moment, and it's just like, just please, someone just create something that's easy. You know?
I think the thing is, well, is that you want, while you're doing with this, you're actually creating standards, so you can actually compare approaches. Where if you've got all sorts of different systems and all different forms of assessing them, then it's very difficult then to actually compare one process with another.
And then you've got a Welsh approach, a Scottish approach, an English approach, you know, the kind of ecometric, or whatever was it, environmental benefits from nature, that's only for England. That doesn't, you know, that doesn't work for us. But it's as though kind of natural capital stops at Gretna, and it doesn't. And it's really frustrating, and that's something that is really, you know, like gets my goat, is like, let's work together on this, because it's not only even the UK, it's got to be, you know, you could say almost across ecosystem, you know, ecotype, whatever it's called, biomes or whatever it is. I can't think, it's late, but you know, it's that, and it's making sure that what we do as well as a developer then could feed into what the Scottish government are doing, and what the public sector needs to do. Because if you're doing natural capital accounts, to me, it makes sense that everybody feeds in to the similar way to measure it, because then you would have a true national capital account. Whereas at the moment, if we're measuring it differently, the Scottish government measuring differently, and then I don't know, a council measures it differently, it's very, very difficult, I think, to compare. And as you were saying, Barbara, that it needs to be compared. So that's my day job.
I was literally saying that to someone else today about sort of breaking down sort of barriers and, you know, looking at it in a holistic way. And actually, just by chance, you know, they were in England. I said, yes, we need to get rid of Hadrian's Wall that seems to somehow erupted between Scotland and England.
Again, it comes up. It's like, oh dear, but I do think, you know, that there is a lot of interest from business, and I think business will really drive it. And investors will really drive it, and you know, it's great that we're being put under pressure to do this, because I think if the regulator weren't saying it, you know, you wouldn't get the interest from up high. I wouldn't have the chance to you know, to do the amount of work on it that we are. So, you know, and it's great. it's great that we're actually putting a value on it, because there was, I don't want to witter on, but there was one example where on a previous project back in 2013, the infamous one, there was an option to put in an access track. It either went in the woodland or it went away from the woodland. The only value that was put on that woodland was the felling costs. So, you know, was it cheaper to fell the trees and put the access track in the trees, or was it cheaper to put it kind of in the moorland and the potential kind of landowner costs? You can't look at it just from a felling point of view, but that's what that particular project manager had in his mind. How much does it cost my project? But at least now, if you take a wider approach, it's like, actually, no, it's how much does it cost to fell those trees? How much does it cost to replace the carbon? How much does it cost to replace the biodiversity and all of those other things? So it's actually, and as I was explaining to the ops, it's about actually providing a real value to, you know, to stuff like woodland. So once you begin to explain to people what it actually can do for them, then they kind of change their tune a bit about how useful
it's
it is.
Really a re-evaluation of the way we look at things.
Yeah, because if it's free, if it's free, we don't care. Yeah,
and really value them,
yeah,
and the importance of them. And I think it's an important process. But you know, we're really at the beginning of it, aren't we?
Yeah.
So that's where all the hard work is.
yeah, but I mean, hopefully we're getting a bit of traction in Scotland now, and we're quite happy to share with anyone our experiences, and it, you know, make it more kind of mainstream. I think that Highlands and Islands Airport Limited are doing biodiversity net gain assessments now. CalMac have done it. I'm waiting to see whether the Highland Council do a biodiversity net gain assessment or natural capital.
I'll be. I did email this. I was a bit late, but the president. I did send the link to be able to sign up in my sort of infrastructure team and stuff like that to come along, but I didn't see any of the names popping up. So
well,
I'll be, once it goes onto YouTube, I'll be sending a link to them. But we've also got sort of climate change officers and sustainability groups and things like that. So once it's on YouTube again, I'll probably be dropping them an email saying, look, it's just, as far as I'm aware, it's nothing. I deal more with the sort of strategic side of flooding, not so much with the construction side of infrastructure projects. But yeah, it was interesting, and it would be good. Well, that's what I'm looking to.
Well, the offer is always, you know, the offer is always there if you want, because I'm based in Inverness anyway. So if you want me to kind of do something for the council, then there's you know, that's absolutely fine. Be that on BNG or be that on kind of natural capital. You know, we're willing to talk, because as I've spoken to Aberdeenshire County Council, Aberdeenshire, the bigger one, not the Aberdeenshire. Kind of, I've spoken to them about it, so we're quite happy to talk to anyone.
No, I will definitely be letting people aware of what the work is doing if they're not. Because
we'll be submitting BNG assessments as part of our planning applications as well. So
yeah, no, because it was interesting, because from the plan side, I don't know how who planning would go to. I think because part of the assessment, who actually would then. I know the council does have. We do have ecologists, or I know Katie and a guy called Ruben, but I don't know how involved they get in the planning application side of things. Do they review? Do the planners go, can you guys review this and things like that? So
yeah,
I'm not aware of that side of things. So again, no, it'd be interesting to see what would happen if you submit it. It's a big. Quite a big document, and then with planners.
Yeah, the offer's there to kind of run you guys through it.
Yeah, no,
and to get your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely be letting people aware in the council that you guys are doing, to see if it's our council as well. They've declared a climate emergency, and it's easy enough to say, yeah, we're declaring it, but then what are you actually going to do? And I know the council are actually are looking at it, and they are setting things up. So this we're quite nicely to say, look, if you're developing new schools, new road projects, infrastructure, lots of things, then what are we doing to look at this side of things? So
yeah, well, we're funding some planting for our Garland Butte Council, so to offset some of our tree losses, but we'll be looking to look at the BNG and kind of natural capital side of that as well. So all sorts of benefits for everyone, I think,
Yes.
on this, because we need to work together on it, I think. So
wonderful. So I just realised what time it is. I don't want to keep you going because I appreciate you've been talking for 2 hours. So
and I'm starving. I'm starving now. Yeah, cool. No, it's good to talk to everyone. Just, if you ever want any more info on what we're doing or anything, just kind of give us a shout. You know where I am. So
I'll do. Yeah, good to see you guys and catch you later.
Yeah, cool. Cheers, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.
And thanks again. Bye.